The recorder. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to EMR 081. This is our third class meeting, and we're going to get into the actual textbook. And today I'm going to lecture on chapters 1 through 3. And so let me pull up my screen and let's check on the course syllabus to make sure we're right on track. So today we'll do lecture on chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. At the end of chapter 3, we'll have questions and answers, and then that'll be the end of today's lesson. And then we come back on the following Friday, which is March 5th. Any questions about today's agenda? So we're going to go chapters 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. Okay, I'll pull up the lecture for today. Okay, there's a lot of good information in the textbook. And like I said, the exam questions come right out of the textbook and from the lecture. So lesson 1, which is what we're going to cover today, is going to provide an introduction and overview of the EMS Vehicle Operator Safety course, also known as EVOS. All right, the Jones and Bartlett, which is the publisher of this book, has partnered with the National Association of EMTs, okay, to publish this course in an effort to reduce ambulance crashes and associated morbidity and mortality rates that go along with this profession. The EVOS program is intended to serve as the cornerstone for the development of a culture of safe driving throughout EMS. It is a profession-wide culture of having a safety-first attitude that's going to be essential for the development of safe driving practices in every service. The accident rate in ambulance drivers has skyrocketed. And the reason it's skyrocketed is because we have younger people that get into this profession that really lack the driving skills and don't quite understand that ambulances have a higher center of gravity. They're a little bit longer, they're wider, and it takes a longer distance to stop, and they tend to start driving over their capabilities. So the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians and its publishing partner developed this course, all right, in an effort to reduce ambulance crashes and associated injuries that occur. The EVOS program is intended to serve as the cornerstone for the development of this culture of safe driving, okay, throughout the entire EMS community. Okay, we have to start developing and carry on with us a profession-wide culture of having a safety-first attitude. That is a test question, by the way, safety-first attitude. I think the number one cause for people being terminated out of the EMS is their lack of safety and not understanding, okay, that it's not like driving your own personal vehicle. All right, I don't think since we're in the classroom, I got to go over the housekeeping thing, but we'll stick to what you and I have been doing, and we'll take a break about every 45 minutes to 50 minutes for us to get up, stretch, get a cup of coffee, get some water, and whatever, just to keep the class moving. All of you have registered in the course, and there will be one final certification exam, and then you will receive a certificate that shows that you've been through the National Association of EMT driver safety course for ambulances. Because of COVID-19, the county and the state has waived the behind the wheel portion of this during the pandemic, and you will be administered the driving part once you go to your ambulance company. All right, there have been too many crashes in the world of EMS. All right, and there has been some analysis done by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration from 1991 to 2000, finding that 301,404 non-fatal crashes and 1,565 fatal crashes, all involving people driving ambulances. You always have to remember the number one rule of medicine, quote, first do no harm. There is a definite need for training emergency vehicle operators. Okay, first came the emergency vehicle operating course, also known as EVOC, and that was created by the U.S. Department of Transportation back in 1978. It was revised again in 1995 as the Emergency Vehicle Operator Course, or ambulance, national standard curriculum. Many instructors became confused by it and walked away looking for an airfield, lots of cones and lots of tires. Okay, it was modeled after the police high-speed pursuit course. High-speed training is not appropriate for EMS personnel. Okay, it had mixed success across the nation because they were finding out that more people were getting in accidents, all right, for driving too fast. And we are not pursuit people at all. Completely different from police driving. Since EVOC was rarely available and emergency vehicles continued to crash, there is a need for a quality course for all emergency vehicle operators. Other useful programs include the following: coaching the emergency vehicle operator, ambulance accident prevention seminar. We had a volunteer fireman's insurance services emergency vehicle driver course. And then we had other local courses and variations of defensive driving courses, all in an effort to reduce the number of accidents that our ambulances have been involved in. I'm kind of painting a picture for you. This is the EMS Vehicle Operator Safety Course. So it's the culmination of a bunch of past practices. It is a national, association accredited emergency medical technician course that you will receive a certificate from. It builds on the strengths of all previous courses. So it took all the best practices. It offers the opportunity for local enrichment of this course as well, because it allows the ambulance companies to build upon this course and incorporate their standard operating procedures. Okay, they can also include the local state laws, their standard operating procedures. They can go over and discuss the specific type of vehicle or ambulances that they have in their company and some of the local crashes. The emphasis on this course is going to be safety for all members of the team and especially our patients. Now, you have to understand that EVOS is not really a certification course. Participants in this class will receive a certificate of completion by attending the entire EVOS course, and you have to score 76% or higher on the post-test and passing the 4 core driving skill stations that will be administered by your ambulance company. The certificate of completion should be considered a learner's permit, which gives participants the knowledge and tools to identify and change their behaviors that might contribute to collisions and fatalities in the world of EMS. This certificate is good for 4 years, and then it has to be renewed again. You can either come back to the College of the Desert to renew this certificate, or sometimes if your ambulance company is accredited through the NAEMT, like we are at College of the Desert, then they can do this recertification course. Taking EVOC class is going to be a starting point in helping you create a culture of safe driving. Time constraints are going to limit the amount of material that can be presented in the classroom. The course manual was designed to cover the core content and also provide referenced information for both agencies and EMS practitioners to use to promote a culture of safe driving in every service. Dangerous driving and risky behaviors are unacceptable, and reporting such behaviors are encouraged. This course manual, if you've taken the time to look through it, includes supplemental information, resources to make continued learning about EMS vehicle and driving safety issues a part of your everyday life. Studies have shown, and I think we touched upon it in the last couple of meetings, the following profile of a typical ambulance crash, okay, includes the following conditions: clear weather, dry road surface, daylight hours, right angle lateral collision, and it occurs at an intersection with a traffic control device. Note, class, that these conditions appear generally favorable, okay, to operate a vehicle in. Sometimes people do not drive with the same heightened awareness that we have when driving under more difficult weather or road conditions, and they tend to let their guards down. Perhaps we should always practice awareness when driving an emergency vehicle. Take a look at this pie chart up here. The Center for Disease Control lists the top 10 causes of traumatic death by age group. These charts, okay, depict the top 2 causes. Motor vehicle collisions are the number 1 or the number 2 cause of death for any age group. All right, inattentiveness, like driving, talking on the cell phone, putting on makeup, eating while driving, is a major cause of motor vehicle fatalities and injuries in the United States. Changing one's driving behavior or changing human behavior takes a lot of time. The first step is to recognize the need for the change. Then, providers, you have to practice, practice, and practice some more. Do not become complacent. Eventually, the change behavior becomes muscle memory. During this class in EVOC, we're going to discuss many examples of less than appropriate behaviors of people driving ambulances. There are plenty of opportunities for improvement. 30 years ago, class, there were few zero tolerance policies. Some human behaviors have improved over the years, but some have not. Change does not always come easily to people. All right. In today's emergency medical services, the fire services, any public safety, we all have a zero tolerance. We have a zero tolerance for people coming to work with alcohol on their breath, coming to work under the influence of a narcotic or a drug, whether it's legal or not, and people coming to work with a lack of sleep, or people coming to work amped up on energy drinks. All of that, zero tolerance in this profession. So you have to understand that. Does anybody remember ever not wearing gloves when you were taking an EMT or an EMR class? And didn't it take a long time? Now, I'm talking about throughout my career, to get EMS providers to wear gloves, masks, and even PPE. I can remember going to the dentist office back in the 60s. Nobody wore a mask, nobody wore gloves, and they were in my mouth, you know, picking away. And I mean, nobody had PPE on. And it took over 30, 40 years to get this behavior changed. Now, how many of you believe, and Rob, I'm going to ask you this question, okay? Do you think training and constant training changes behavior?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Because here's the point, and it's already been proven. The way people train in a controlled environment is the way that they're going to behave in an uncontrolled environment. So when people start to take shortcuts, in other words, they don't use 3 points of contact getting in and out of the ambulance, they don't fasten their seatbelt, they don't drive the speed limit, okay, sooner or later, they're setting themselves up for an accident. And last class, we talked about the 5 keys of defensive driving known as the Smith system. And no matter which accident we take a look at during this course, you will be able to identify one or more keys of those defensive driving, okay, that was violated that led up to the cause of the accident. People think, oh yeah, I've been trained, I went through the fire academy, I know everything. No, you don't. All you did was just build the foundation. In order to determine the difficulty in improving safety among vehicle operators, we have to ask several questions to be considered. Okay, do all EMS agencies share best practices? We try to do it in the fire service. Okay, do we learn from our mistakes and the mistakes of others? I try to. I make mistakes every day. All right, and I try to learn from other people's mistakes. Okay, some say the only thing we learn from history is that we do not learn from history. Like, what the heck does that mean? Okay, do services conduct regular motor vehicle record reviews on all emergency vehicle operators? I know we do in the fire service. We are under the DMV pull notice, so anytime you get a ticket on or off duty, we get notified. Anytime you get arrested, we get notified. Okay, how much of a factor is the hero mentality and rushing to save seconds causes accidents? I'm going to show you a couple of videos in this course where people had that attitude and they wound up taking the life of a mother and her son in an automobile accident caused by 2 ambulance guys rushing to the scene of an accident. Arriving on scene or at the hospital 30 seconds faster while putting the entire crew in jeopardy is unacceptable in today's standard. Now, to determine the difficulty in improving safety among vehicle operators, several questions need to be considered. Again, does the use of emergency dispatching protocols help reduce the number of emergency responses in our community? That's one thing we have to consider. The next one, are crashes an acceptable part of doing business? My answer to that one is no. Is road rage increasing? I say it is. Okay, we all tend to believe we are good drivers. Why is it always the other driver's fault, though? All right, we need to consider a couple of more things. Bad behavior that is not met with a consequence, all that does, class, is reinforce the bad behavior. Most drivers underestimate the task of driving, and they overestimate their ability to drive and control the vehicle that they're operating. Even though some participants in this course may have many years of experience, EVOC, okay, will help them to be better prepared to interact on the road with the less experienced driving public. If you remember, one of the questions I posed in the last 2 class meetings is the key to defensive driving is anticipation. Okay, anticipating what the other driver may or may not do. All right. Suppose you are I want you to think a minute. Suppose you are the passenger in an ambulance that is responding to a call. You hear the beeping sound that indicates the vehicle operator does not have her seatbelt buckled. What should you do? Alma, what would you do?
I'd turn over and tell them to put it on.
Okay. Marilyn, would you agree or disagree with Alma?
Um, well, since I'm the passenger, I mean, I would remind her safety, safety, safety. I mean, if she's doing that in an ambulance with the patient and myself, I could just imagine what she's doing at home with her kids, her husband, or so and so. You could tell she doesn't do it on a regular basis, you know? And she probably
Yeah.
just put it on just to jump out of the ambulance, what, half a second earlier?
You know what? Both of you are absolutely correct. All right. I would demand, this is me, I would demand that the vehicle operator buckle her seatbelt. As I already know, most ambulance companies that I deal with, okay, it's part of their SOP. And besides that, it's state law now. And even if it wasn't law, it was the right thing to do. All right. The vehicle operator's different point of view, like both of you have pointed out, could injure or kill you and your patients. We don't tolerate that. Absolutely not. Okay, so the goals of this course is to provide practical tools and tips for you to improve your driving. We will review the laws, rules, and policies that affect providers' response. There is also an opportunity to discuss some agency-specific rules and SOPs. We are going to discuss how crashes occur and how they can be prevented. We're going to review cases and the lessons that can be learned from them. We're going to discuss how to safely handle EMS vehicles and describe the dangers of distractions. All right, most of you already have a driver's license, so you should be a little knowledgeable on vehicle traffic laws. All right, and knowing the laws and knowing your standard operating procedures when it comes to driving and operating ambulances should be your top priority. It's not an option. Okay, when you get that job, you're going to be put into a training up to 90 days so you can learn their standard operating procedure, learn what the standard protocols are, when to run code 3, when not to run code 3, and to know that ambulance inside and out, and more importantly, to do that pre-trip inspection. This course, okay, is going to be the full course. The recertification course is 8 hours. So I wanted to let you guys know that. So within 4 years, it's going to be an 8-hour course. You're going to come back. It's going to probably include about 4 hours of lecture and then about 3.5 hours of driving, advanced driving.
I had a question.
Yes.
So advanced driving, is that like with the cones where you like go in and
Yes.
out? Kind of
Yes.
stuff? Okay.
And it could be, I know that last year we did skid control up at the Glen Helen on the skid pad.
Okay. Cool.
There wasn't one student. Actually, it was funny because I asked the class, I said, so how many of you ever been into a skid? And some of them raised their hand and said, you guys know how to get out of the skid? Oh, yeah, we know. Not one of them was able to control the ambulance in a skid. They did a 360, they ran off the road in it. That's how fast that can happen. We flooded the pad and experienced hydroplaning. Hydroplaning occurred at 28 miles an hour. So it really opened up the eyes to a lot of these young drivers that thought they knew everything. All right, let's take a look at this picture. All right, and as I describe this, let's take a look at it. Throughout the course, we as a class will be using these driving situations to stimulate some discussion. All right, the purpose of the driving situations depicted in the following lessons will be: the lessons that follow include scenarios that are developed from real world experiences. All right, they will also include driving situations depicted through driving simulator images. These depictions are designed class to facilitate a class dialogue, allowing participants to point out various issues that may be presented as you look at this picture. Okay, sometimes the slides will focus on a specific behavior and ask you, how do you feel about that behavior? So I'm going to be randomly calling people. All right, so everybody needs to pay attention here because this is an active participant class. Okay, now a driving situation slide can be very complex, as looking at this one here. Okay, allowing both the instructor and the participants to identify multiple potential hazards. So when you look at this slide right here, and you are pulling up into the ambulance, okay, what are some of the hazards that you see? Just looking at it from a helicopter, from the big point of view. How about you, Perla? Take a look at the slide here, and what are some hazards? You can see it looks like there's a 2-car collision in the #1 lane. All right, you can see the ambulance. Look at where the ambulance is parked at. It's parked in front of the accident. All right, and notice how the fire truck, okay, and the law enforcement vehicles, notice how they are all parked to protect the scene. As an ambulance driver, okay, what are some of your concerns? All right, Perla, you're on stage.
Should there be any cones around the site of the accident so the rest of the cars can tell that there's an accident? Or
A lot
because
of
I
times,
see there's the semi truck, or is that a semi truck?
yeah, a lot of times, Perla,
Mm-hmm.
you'll get on scene before they even set up flares or anything. So look at the way the fire truck is set, okay? And then look at the
Mm-hmm.
way that the police car is set. And I can't quite make out what's in front of the police car, but notice how they've all blocked the #1 lane, protecting the scene. So your ambulance is protected, okay, to the best of the ability based on the scene. But yes, I mean, ambulances, we don't carry road cones or cones on. So your primary safety here is never put your back to oncoming traffic. All right. I mean,
Okay.
so you can see you're protected by the crash scene itself, by the fire truck that's parked at an angle, and by the semi truck. And then you've got the police car behind it. And they're all forcing the vehicles over into the #3 and the #4 lane. But notice what's happening on the other side of the freeway. What's happening to the vehicles? They're starting to slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want you to stop for a minute because a lot of you travel on Interstate 10. And I want you to look at what's going on Interstate 10 between Highway 111 and all the way through Beaumont. Notice how the center divider is being raised so you can't see what's going on the other side of the freeway. This is exactly why they're doing that. Because what happens is people will start slowing down and then they start causing a pileup on the other side of the freeway because of looky-loos. So now Caltrans has decided to raise the barrier just so you can't see what's going on the other side. So take a look at that the next time you all are traveling on the highway. And Perla, you did a good job. You're absolutely correct. What I wanted to point out in this picture is simply this. Look at where the ambulance parks, way in the front, well protected. All right, and notice, and I want you to remember especially when you guys that are going to take EMT or when the program opens up and you get to go out on the ambulance, you never want to turn your back on traffic. somebody in that ambulance crew has to be watching traffic. All right, let's take a look at the next slide.
Hey, Professor, real quick, don't they have like reflective gear and stuff like that too? If
Yes,
it's-
they do. They're required to have reflective gear as well. Absolutely correct. And even the students, when we get back into the EMT program, you're going to be issued a helmet and reflective gears when you go out. It's OSHA's new requirement now.
Mm.
Now take a look at this picture. Okay, this is another driving situation. Look at the ambulance. Okay, what are some of the hazards? And I'll ask you, Jeremiah, you're the ambulance driver. What do you see here that would be a danger to you or that you might want to be aware of?
I think the first initial hazard would be the pedestrians that are crossing the street, as well as the oncoming traffic, since the ambulance is trying to like go around it. And I mean those are the hazards I see.
Yep. I see one more hazard. Okay. Now, Jeremiah, look at the bus. All right. And look at that green Jeep that's getting ready to turn right that can't see the ambulance because the driver's view is blocked from the bus.
Yeah,
See
that would be another hazard too.
Yeah. And now look at the red car, which is a little bit behind the Jeep, whose view is also blocked
Mm-hmm.
by the bus. This is what I mean about slowing way down when you approach an intersection. Because right now, Jeremiah, you and I are in that ambulance. We have no idea if those pedestrians, if some of them are deaf. All right. I know by looking at this that the driver in the Jeep can't see us coming. I don't know if they can even hear us because look at the windows rolled up. I have
Yeah.
no idea about the driver of the red car, whether they can see us or hear us. So this creates a very dangerous situation. And this is where you've got to aim high in steering, get the big picture, keep your eyes moving, leave yourself an out, and make sure they see you. This intersection would need to be approached at about 3 to 5 miles per hour.
Okay.
All right, you agree? I mean,
Yeah.
did I miss any other hazards? Maybe somebody else might see something that, and besides that, he has, I mean, the Jeep and the red car have the green light, right? And the pedestrians have the green hand.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things that we need to be cognizant of. Good job, Jeremiah. You picked out some good hazards. Excellent. All right, the 10 core lectures in this EVOC course are going to be making safety a priority, our EMS vehicle operation and the law, maneuvering our vehicle inspection and maintenance, the mental, emotional, and physical preparedness, emergency response, crash prevention, driving skills, which we won't have in this class because of the pandemic, all the new technological aids that are out in ambulances now. And then we're going to be doing some simulation training as well. All right, so any questions on what we've covered so far? All right. All right, then what we're going to do is we're going to take our first 10-minute break while I get the other presentation up, and then we'll be back here at 10 minutes. All right, so we'll see you back here in 10.
Okay.
Okay, are there any questions on what we covered in lesson 2? pretty much straightforward. All right, moving forward then with lesson 3. And again, this lesson will discuss the laws that affect the EMS vehicle operation. In this lesson, we will define the types of laws that affect EMS vehicle operation. We will explain the legal terms related to EMS vehicle operation. We will describe the appropriate use of lights and sirens. And we will discuss safety considerations for responding to an emergency scene. We will also discuss the assessment of liability and how liability affects the driver of the ambulance. We will explain the steps the emergency vehicle operator can take to avoid legal entanglements, and we will describe how to respond appropriately in the event of a collision. All right, so as we take a look at this picture, let me set the stage for you. You and your partner respond, okay, to a priority 1 dispatch. You approach a red traffic light. There is no traffic to the left and a few vehicles to your right, and they are stopped at the intersection. You slow down slightly and proceed through the intersection. A BMW pulls directly in front of your ambulance from the right. You react quickly and hit the brakes, but your vehicle hits the driver's side door. You and your partner are unharmed. The other driver is conscious, alert, and oriented. Her left leg appears to be broken. She also appears to be trapped in the vehicle and will require extrication by the fire department. You notify dispatch to assign another ambulance to the original call and request that police, fire rescue, another ambulance, and a supervisor come to your crash scene. The police department will not be issuing a citation, but the town attorney's office is notified that the driver has brought a $7 million lawsuit against your ambulance company. You must hire an attorney because you are personally named in the suit. Eventually, all parties agree to a settlement for a large sum of money. Now, let me ask you some questions as you look at this picture. Okay, how often do you feel you would have to review and have trainings on local driving laws? Do you think that that question would come into play during a lawsuit? It's either yes or no. I could tell you, yes, it does. Okay, and let me ask another question that we need to be thinking about. What are your standard operating procedures once you work for an ambulance company, the protocols and or responsibilities when you witness or are involved in a traffic collision? I think today would be a good day for me to play a video of actually a couple of videos, just so you can see what happens to an individual when they're involved in a traffic accident and how it's affected their life. Okay, and again, these are things that are going to be asked as a result of a traffic accident that you may be involved in. When we discuss laws, we need to discuss responsibility. Okay, the service leadership needs to create an environment where safety is going to be a top priority. This is done with high quality training, policies, and modeling excellent behaviors at all times, not just when somebody is watching. Okay, your service leadership should remain current with all laws and policies that pertain to driving emergency vehicles in your jurisdiction. The emergency vehicle operator must follow company policies and local laws pertaining to emergency vehicles. Be familiar, class, with the state traffic laws, specific municipality ordinances, and all of your agency's standard operating procedures related to emergency vehicle operation. All right, most departments that you'll work for will distribute copies of their policies and a summary of your state's vehicle and traffic laws as they pertain to the operation of your emergency vehicle. Now, in an ambulance crash, there is likely to be both a criminal and a civil suit. The suit is about liability and it's based on your negligence. Okay? People involved in the accident will be people involved in the lawsuit will be the person suing is called the plaintiff, and the person being sued is called the defendant. Then there's a question of liability, the determination of who is primarily at fault for the collision. Then we address negligence. The vehicle operator knew the right thing to do, but did not perform his or her responsibilities correctly. To prove negligence in a court of law, dealing in a vehicle crash, the plaintiff would have to prove that the defendant had a responsibility to act in a certain way and that he or she failed to act in that way, resulting in a collision that caused injury. Then there's the term called gross negligence, a more serious form of negligence that implies reckless conduct and a blatant disregard for the safety and lives of others. The line between negligence, class, and gross negligence may need to be determined by a court of law. Key questions the court will want to ask could be, did the emergency vehicle operator have reasonable grounds to believe he or she was responding to a true emergency? Another question that the court may ask is, did the emergency vehicle operator exercise due regard for the safety of others? Now, criminal law involves determining violations of statutes. If the accused is convicted, that person could be punished by jail or prison, incarceration, or both. For minor criminal offenses, the police will issue a citation and the judge would most likely impose a fine. An example would be illegal parking. Serious criminal offenses, the person is arrested, placed in jail, and would need to arrange for legal representation in ensuring criminal proceedings. Okay, example would be striking a pedestrian who is seriously injured or dies. The civil law is a little bit more broader. In a civil action, an injured person files a lawsuit. The plaintiff, who will be the person suing, names a defendant, which is the person that's being sued. The plaintiff asks for monetary compensation for injuries and other damages that may have incurred. Injuries may be physical, emotional, or psychological, as well as pain and suffering. Examples of damages could be loss of employment or other financial harm. Civil laws, class, are often invoked against a vehicle operator in cases of vehicle collisions. An emergency vehicle operator can have both a criminal and a civil suit brought against him or her for the same offense. In criminal cases, the prosecution must provide to a jury that the accused is guilty of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, so what does that mean? A reasonable person would not doubt the accused party is guilt. Okay, in civil cases, here's the difference. The plaintiff must provide his or her case beyond only a preponderance of the evidence, which means they only have to tip the scale 51% instead of 100%. Okay, there is slightly more evidence of innocence than of guilt. Not all cases, though, are settled in court. The jury may choose to award the plaintiff compensation from the defendant at the amount requested or at a higher or lower amount based on the level of negligence. Most state laws were developed based on a similar model. When driving an emergency vehicle on a presumed emergency call, there are some exemptions provided in each state. We went over that earlier in day 1 and day 2 of this class. However, the emergency vehicle operator is still going to be held responsible for the safety of all others. Violations involve the criminal justice system. Examples are speeding, illegal passing, traffic control device disregard, traveling in the wrong direction, etc. Punishment could involve a traffic ticket or a fine imposed by the judge. Now, you heard me talk a little bit about true emergency. A true emergency is a situation in which there is a high probability of death or serious injury to an individual or of significant property loss, and the actions of the responders can mitigate the situation. Relocating the ambulance to cover another station class is not a true emergency. Due regard for the safety of others. You heard me talk about that last week. Due regard for the safety of others is taking precautions that a reasonable, careful person would be expected to take if he or she were performing similar duties and under similar circumstances. Due regard class is used only when driving in an emergency situation. You need to ask yourself these questions. Am I giving enough notice by using the devices provided on my vehicle? Here's another question you need to ask yourself. Am I using caution with my speed, making sure I am able to control the vehicle and stop as necessary? The emergency vehicle operator is held to a much higher standard than all other drivers on the road. You are given a tremendous amount of responsibility when on a true emergency, yet you must still show due regard for the safety of all others. You must give notice of your approach. Simply driving with red lights and no siren is not code 3. Driving with the siren and red lights is not code 3. You must drive with red lights and siren in order to be provided the exemptions in 21055 of the California Vehicle Code. Other motorist class are not held to the due regard standard. This is why ambulance crashes often are passed on to the grand jury, in the local jurisdiction to determine the extent of criminal activity. Also, the media will explore all aspects of the crash, and do not, be surprised if your name and address appear in the news or the newspaper. All right, this is another video. Let me set the stage here for you. This video will show a collision between an ambulance and a fire truck. Now, the ambulance crashed into the side of the truck. The truck flipped on its side. The ambulance driver was suspended for 96 hours for gross negligence. Let's take a look at this video and see which keys or which of the 5 keys of defensive driving were violated. Alma, who do you think was at fault?
I want to say the ambulance. It looked like they had the red lights, and the fire truck will have the green light. So
Okay, let me ask you a question. Okay, how could you have avoided this accident if you were the driver of the ambulance? What would you have done different?
definitely slow down.
Yeah, did the driver of the ambulance check left, right, left before they proceeded through the intersection?
No, they did not.
All of us, including Jeremiah, because I see him shaking his head like I am, that this is a preventable accident. That if the ambulance driver would have stopped and looked left, right, left before entering the intersection, they would have seen the approaching fire truck that had the right of way. And this accident could have been avoided. This is considered gross negligence, especially after taking a class. What you don't know is that this ambulance operator took a class similar to this. Okay, and again, they felt that they didn't have to go back and get recertified. They didn't pay attention in class. They thought they knew it all. All this came out in this court case, and the instructor even got subpoenaed to class to show the negligence of the ambulance operator that was this covered in class? Yes, sir. Was this covered in class? Yes, sir. How do you know it was covered in class? Because I teach from the lesson plan each and every time. Do you see what the defense attorney's trying to do for that driver? Trying to show the driver how negligent, trying to show the jury how negligent the driver was. Not staying within the scope of their training. Now, these are some questions that will be asked. Yes,
Professor?
Jeremiah.
So like going back to that scenario, would the fire truck also be at fault in some way because they didn't take the same precautions as an ambulance driver, or no?
Yes, the fire truck did not break the law, but then there becomes a question of, okay, the driver of the fire truck. If he would have, remember we talked last week about even if you have the green light, how important it is to slow down and look at the intersection. So even though the driver of the fire truck is not held criminally, it would still be a preventable accident because the driver of that fire truck is held to a higher standard. And if he would have slowed down when he approached the intersection and starting looking both ways, he would have seen the ambulance coming. You see what I'm saying? Even though the fire truck was not criminally wrong, it's still a preventable accident because he's held to a higher standard. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, because I didn't think that he had the green light. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, remember I said last week, just because you have a green light does not mean you can just barrel right through the intersection because you're held to a higher standard. This is why I know you hear me say it 1,000 times. You've got to have your head on the swivel. Okay, you've got to have your head on the swivel. Okay, so these are some questions that are going to be asked in an accident like this. Let's go over them. Are there any state, national, or department standards for emergency vehicle operations that apply in this accident? Do any state statutes regarding emergency vehicle exemptions apply? Was the emergency vehicle operator properly trained and supervised per accepted standards? And did the emergency vehicle operator follow their agency SOPs? Here's another question that'll be asked. Okay, was the vehicle properly equipped and was the equipment being properly operated? And are there records of repairs and maintenance on that vehicle? Were the manufacturer's ratings of the vehicle exceeded by the operator? And finally, did the emergency vehicle have seat belts? And if so, were they properly utilized? All these, this is just some of the questions that would be asked, okay, during the course of investigating this accident that we just saw. All right, so let's take a look. Why are similar events perceived differently? All right, let's take a look at event one. All right, event one, a preschool aged child on a big wheel rolled down his driveway and entered the street. A pine tree was a potential obstruction to the view of oncoming traffic. Two middle-aged people were in a car traveling at the posted speed limit. The child darted out in front of them, and they did not see the child before striking and killing the child. The police interviewed witnesses and gave the driver a field sobriety test. There was no ticket issued because it was determined that the vehicle could not have avoided hitting the child. Okay? Now let's take a look at event number 2. An ambulance responding to a call on a residential street was exceeding the posted speed limit by not more than 10 miles per hour as allowed by company policy. A school-aged child rode his bicycle into the side of the ambulance. He was not wearing a helmet and was fatally injured. The police interviewed witnesses, measured skid marks, and did a field sobriety test. In this case, although no evidence appeared to indicate that the EMS crew was at fault and no tickets were issued, the case was turned over to the grand jury for further investigation. The media attacked the EMS service and published the name and address of the emergency vehicle operator. In the end, the grand jury determined that the crash could not have been avoided and the emergency vehicle operator was not at fault, but the services and the operator's reputation was deeply damaged. Why are these similar events perceived differently by the public? Aniko, I'm going to ask you this question. Same event, but one involved a private citizen, one involved EMS.
It's like you said, that we're held to a higher standard than to the regular public, and it's different just because I guess technically we're going faster even though we're allowed to, and it's more in like, I guess, the public eye and not so private.
Yep, you're right. You're right. Okay. And here's another question, and just think about it. Nobody has to answer it. Are the outcomes of emergency vehicle collisions interpreted differently if the vehicles are not on a run? Okay. I mean, think about it. If you were in the jury and this vehicle was not on a run, would you interpret the facts a little differently? Here's another question that you need to think about. What are ways to decrease incidents of emergency vehicle collisions and improve the perception of vehicle operators? So again, okay, same scenario, two different ones with the EMS, ones with not, and I think Anika's hit it right on the button with her answer. So you're going to be under scrutiny all the time. And again, I cannot tell you how important it is to be physically fit and be alert and well rested when you come to work, because they will delve into your private life big time, okay, to prove negligence. So don't even give them that opportunity. Do it right the first time. Be attentive, class, and practice safe driving. Your greatest likelihood of a legal entanglement in the EMS profession is associated with collisions responding to calls for service and during transport. If you are involved in a crash, stay calm and follow your service's SOPs. This may involve calling for a backup ambulance to move your patient and notifying the police and your supervisor right away. Cooperate with the police investigating, but do not make any statements to the media, other drivers, or bystanders. That's what we have PIOs for. Every service needs to have a policy in place should an emergency vehicle be involved in a crash. Chapter 12 of your student manual offers a discussion of steps to include in a safety policy that's outlined on pages 116 through 117 in your book. Or you can insert, once you get your job, your company's policy and distribute a copy to participants at that time. Agencies may also find it helpful to implement a near-miss program, which allows the organization to be aware of close calls that might otherwise go unrecognized. Now, if a crash occurs, follow the law and your service's SOPs. Report the incident via radio per your protocols. Remember, other people may be listening to your radio transmissions via a scanner. Secure the scene to ensure safety until law enforcement or other responders can arrive on scene. Take care of any injured persons, including yourself. If a crash occurs, make sure you make no public statements. Fill out the required reporting documents. Supervisors should photograph the scene for reports. Secure any equipment, such as narcotics and computers, in the event that the unit will be towed and held for evidence during the investigation. Use the incidents information class to create or update an SOP. Ask yourself these questions. Was a policy of the service violated? Was the vehicle operator at fault? What were the mitigating factors? As an example, was it a vehicle problem, equipment failure, road hazards, or was the driver fatigued? Has the situation occurred before? And if so, what was done in the past to eliminate it or reduce the risk of this occurring? Of course, if there is litigation in progress, you will need to wait before proceeding with this type of an interview or internal review. Your SOPs class are a living document and they should be updated anytime the need arises. Okay. Now, required use of red lights and siren will be defined in the various state laws. Some laws are very old. For example, in New York, the term audible device is used, not siren. Okay, the use of signaling equipment does not guarantee motorists and pedestrians are aware of the vehicle's presence. Emergency warning devices should be used when taking any exemptions to traffic laws. If your service has an SOP, you've got to follow it. That way you'll be protected. If your service has a policy that is more restrictive than the state laws, remember class, you must follow, okay, both the law and your service's SOP in order to be covered in a lawsuit. If motorists or pedestrians don't give you the right of way, okay, they are breaking the law, but you are still required to give them due regard. All right, let's take a look at this picture here. Remember that sun glare, fog, and tinted windows in other vehicles can reduce the effectiveness of your lights. Warning lights mounted on the top of your vehicle may not be visible in the rearview mirror of those in front of you. That's why a lot of emergency vehicles now, take a look at our CHP vehicles now. Look at where their lights are mounted. They're mounted in the grille, they're mounted on the bumpers, they're mounted in the side view mirrors. They're finding that the lights mounted on the roof are not always as visible. Many states have added a blue light to the white or red beacon seen for 360 degrees because blue lights can be seen in poor weather easier than red or amber lights. At night, red warning lights may blend in with other red lights and traffic or neon lights on the side of the street. Okay, do blinking lights, let me ask you a question. Do blinking rear lights help define the size of your vehicle, or do they simply confuse the public? Okay, it all depends on the motorists that are passing by your scene at the time of the incident. You and I have no control over other motorists. let's talk a little bit about our sirens and how they tend to give people a false sense of security. In general class, sirens can be heard only within 230 feet ahead of your vehicle. Do your own survey. Next time you are stopped in traffic and a vehicle with a siren is approaching, ask yourself, how close does the vehicle have to be for you to hear it above your heater, air conditioner, and your stereo system? At speeds, here's something, this is a test question coming up. Okay, at speeds greater than 40 miles an hour, ambulances can outrun the effectiveness of a siren. Other motorists have difficulty determining the approaching direction of the siren. Sirens are considered omnidirectional, which means the sound seems to be coming from multiple directions. Drivers will often admit that they heard the siren, but weren't sure where it was coming from. Air horns are considered unidirectional, which means the sound comes from one place, okay, which is where it originated from. Drivers tend to identify the location of the emergency vehicle much quicker when air horns are used in conjunction with sirens. A siren is always competing with the heater, air conditioning fan, the radio stereo system in other vehicles, the sound installation of the other vehicle when the windows are closed, and the general distractions of other motorists. Sirens and lights should remain on when driving in an emergency situation. You should not get into the habit of using the siren intermittently. You are setting yourself up for a lawsuit. This is not only dangerous, but it does not give ample warning to other drivers. But yet I see it all the time. Okay, do not fall into that false sense of security. I want you to ask yourself these questions. Will the time saved make a significant difference in the patient's outcome? Okay, will emergency transport create an unnecessarily unsafe situation for the public, yourself, and partners, and the patient? What effect will the emergency warning devices have on the surrounding public, patient, driver, and crews? Again, it takes a lot of critical thinking and a lot of common sense. This is why you need to follow your service's SOPs on response, including those for use of personal vehicles. Remember that privately owned personal vehicles are not given any special privileges. So they should have always been driven following all the laws when responding to the scene or a station. That statement pretty much is directed toward the Midwest, where they have EMTs that the state law requires that they can respond in their POVs. Not so here in California. Remember, okay, if your vehicle has a legal light, always drive within the limits of the law. And remember, you draw a lot of attention to yourself and your organization when responding with red lights and siren. All right, let's take a look at this picture up here, and I'll set the stage for you. In this slide, the ambulance is in the proper lane of travel and has both its lights and its siren engaged, and the driver intends to go straight. Let me ask you the following questions as you look at this picture. What is the best course of action to take based on what you've learned so far? I'm going to ask Marilyn.
So the best course of action, you said?
Yeah, if you're driving the ambulance and you're approaching an intersection as you see it, what would be your best course of action?
Well, I'm noticing that the light is red. And of course, I hope I have my sirens on and the horn. And the light's red, so I will slow down and look left and right before I get there. And as I'm driving through the intersection, I mean, you would hope the red car would move to the right lane, but I mean, that short distance, I don't know if he would or not. So basically
Yeah,
just slow down before the intersection, look left and right before and then during as I'm crossing.
and Marilyn, let me ask you a question. What are some of the concerns that's going through your mind right now as you approach this intersection? What do
Uh,
you see that could be a hazard to you?
the big trucks, the Frito-Lay truck, whether he might or might not hear me, he probably won't hear me because it's a big truck and those are diesel trucks. They make pretty loud noise.
Okay. Let's say now the vehicles are all stopped. Okay, how would you go through that intersection?
I mean, how would I go through it? I mean, just slowing down and making sure there's no more vehicles that are moving.
Yeah, it's hard to sit here and look at this and what if, okay? Because if you say, okay, I will pass on the right because I have an open lane, then you run the risk of the people seeing in your rearview mirror, and they're going to shoot off to the right because that's what they were trained to do when they see an approaching vehicle.
Okay.
All right, and if you go to the left, okay, then you run the risk of, well, what about that? Okay, the truck turning left, and then you got the Frito-Lay truck that appears to be wanting to make a right turn. So the whole purpose of this situation is to make you aware of the hazards. Every intersection is going to present a different set of hazards. And Marilyn, you chose, I mean, your answers were very good, okay, for not ever driving an ambulance with red lights and sirens before. Okay, so some of the answers that might be acceptable might include moving left to center, waiting for the red car, okay, to pull to the right, shutting down the siren and waiting it out, or shutting down the siren and using the right lane. I don't know. It just depends because you and I have no control over the other drivers. So how far does a siren project when traveling 40 miles per hour? In general, okay, a siren is heard only within 230 feet ahead of the vehicle. So at speeds greater than 40 miles per hour, the effectiveness of that siren can be outrun, and it's almost like not even having a siren. Note that the laws of some states require motorists to move to the closest curb, while others require motorists to pull to the right. Okay, if you are in a high tourism state, the other driver may use the law governing his or her own state. For example, okay, let's talk about Florida for a minute. Florida state law says to pull to the closest curb, but a tourist from Maryland may follow Maryland law and pull across 3 lanes of traffic to move all the way over to the right. So just be aware of that wherever you work. But Marilyn, you gave good answers.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
So speaking of that, what's the liability of cars that refuse to pull over?
You're going to either have to shut down. Well, the liability is they'll get a ticket.
Right. I mean, they have
Here in
liability.
California,
Otherwise,
here in California, it's $1,558 plus court fees and penalty assessment.
right.
But-
Because when
but
I'm
you-
driving, I see a lot of cars that actually don't pull over for the ambulance. So
No, they don't. Or how many times have you seen this? Okay, where they stop, they just slam their brakes on and just freeze. And you don't know whether they're going to pull to the right or the left. Right? I mean, I've seen that. That's happened to me before driving a fire truck. So, it's like you and I in this capacity are not law enforcement officers. There's not a whole lot we can do. Okay, I'm just going to have to maneuver around it the best I can. And sometimes that means shutting everything down and waiting for the traffic light to change. They're hard decisions, Rob. Good question. But again, what's the safest way? You're going to have to make that decision driving. But you came up with some good answers, with some good questions. All right, now let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this one right here. In this slide, okay, the ambulance is in the proper lane of travel and has both its lights and its siren engaged, and the driver intends to go straight. Okay, so what is the best course of action to take based on the law and your SOP? Okay, I'll answer that question. Okay, some of the answers that students may have would be moving left of center, waiting for the red car to pull off to the right, or shutting down the siren and waiting it out, or shutting down the siren, okay, and using the left lane. The red vehicle in front of the ambulance does not yield the right of way. Okay, I think this is just exactly what Rob was just talking about. Why do you think the vehicle is not going to yield? Okay, it could be any number of reasons. It could be the driver is inattentive to the surroundings. The driver does not hear or see the red lights and siren of the ambulance. The car is extremely well insulated against outside noise. And at 40 miles per hour, the ambulance has outrun its siren and the other driver hasn't heard it approaching. So just be aware there can be any number of reasons why most drivers do not drive using the Smith system, the 5 keys of defensive driving. You're going to have to take that into account. Here's another one. Okay, now take a look at what happened when the guy starts passing on the right. In this slide, the ambulance operator decided to go around the obstruction and pass on the right. There is no law that prohibits this, but extreme caution must be used. Should the emergency vehicle operator have passed on the right? If so, how should it have been accomplished? What are some of the signs that the emergency vehicle operator should have looked for? Okay, the driver hears the siren and panics and then immediately pulls to the right, striking the ambulance. I can already tell you this would be a preventable accident because in all EVOC classes, okay, we teach you never pass on the right when you're driving red lights and siren, ever. Why? Because the vehicle code in this state states that all drivers upon the approach of an emergency vehicle displaying a red light and siren must yield and pull to the right of the road and stop. All right, so this would be a preventable accident. What should the emergency vehicle operator have done? The emergency vehicle operator should have remained in the left lane behind the offending vehicle, changing siren tones and using air horns to get the driver's attention. Okay, so what laws, if any, were broken here? Although there is no law in this state stating that the ambulance can't overtake traffic from the right lane, it should be noted that it is dangerous, it is a dangerous act, and the emergency vehicle operator needs to be extremely aware and be able to predict what the other driver might do. All right, so you need to ask yourself this question. All right, what would you have done differently? All right, I would be approaching this intersection probably at about 5 to 8 miles per hour, and I would be looking at all drivers. I would be looking at which way their wheels. I'd be looking to see if their brake lights were on. I'd be looking at all kinds of things. The emergency vehicle operator must understand, class, all laws and legal terms relative to your job. You got to understand the appropriate use of lights and siren. Okay, you have to understand liability issues that may arise if you are involved in a collision. You also must understand how to avoid legal entanglements. To stay out of legal entanglements as an emergency vehicle operator, you need to follow your department's SOP, follow the way you were trained, and drive Okay, practice safe driving and drive within the law. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video. Okay, so give me a minute to get it up. It's going to be a couple of video clips. Okay, let me pull up, share my screen. And take a look now. These are a couple of ambulance guys that were involved in a traffic accident. And it looks back on what they did, what they would have did different, and how it affected their lives. So I think this ties in. There's a series of about 3 videos. So I want to play it, the first clip right now. Everybody see the screen? It says looking back.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Ten minutes before the accident, I was living life and having a ball doing something I love to do. Had my entire career ahead of me, had no place to go but up. And I was there. I was in for a promotion, which would have put me into full inspector. So everything was in front of me, and I was having a ball. I had the best of everything that I wanted to do with my career. 10 minutes after the accident, all got flushed right down the drain. It's gone that fast. Many of the losses that I experienced personally as a result of that accident were the losses of self-esteem, the loss of focus and direction. Looking at my family members and what I thought were friends and seeing many of them detach themselves and just become acquaintances. And certainly the loss of my own identity, questioning myself, was I worthy? Did I have any worth? Was there a purpose for me to even be here anymore? Somebody got hurt. Actually, a lot of people got hurt. You know, a woman that lost her life, a little girl that was severely injured, 2 paramedics that were injured, one lost his career. Search your heart, search your soul. Live it and know that you're committed to it, committed to reducing your losses. You're committed to excellence. You're committed to quality, patient care, and the highest standards of safety. Search your heart and see if you're committed to it or if you're just passing through. If it's a career, if it's just a job. If you can't say yes to the professionalism, if you can't say yes to you live it every day, it's in your heart, it's in your soul, it's a part of your being, if you're not committed to it, leave the industry, find something else that's more suited to you. Don't take up a space or a place for somebody that could do the job a little bit better and wants to. Search your conscience, because you won't be happy when you have a tragedy in your organization. Do not allow that adrenaline rush to drive the ambulance. Gain your composure. Make sure that you get in an organized manner and place that seatbelt on. You've got to be aware, number one, of their physiological state. What is that adrenaline rush doing to them? And do they have it under control? If it's not under control, then basically they're out of control. That's something I never understood or even knew about until after the accident. You have to come to a stop at the intersection. You have to stop at the red light. We call it prior intersection stoppage. You have to look in both directions. If there are cars coming that don't see you, you're delayed anyway. You have to wait for them to clear the intersection. Look, it happened. This is what can happen to you because of the precedent set. So you better start thinking about it so it doesn't happen to you. You can pick up a newspaper, you can pick up industry journals and read other tragedies, other ambulance drivers. I'm sure just like when we sit there and watch the nightly news, we say to ourselves, wow, that's tragic. I'm glad it didn't happen to me. It couldn't happen to me. Yes, it can. I am a walking example of it right here. They need to know that they have the potential to kill as well as to save. And it all starts when they stick a key in the ignition, they put a shift in drive, and they engage a gas pedal. They have one or two choices. Sometimes fate makes the choice for them, but they add to the adverse consequences of fate. Do I bring life or do I bring death? It's truly in their hands.
Okay. Bear with me. I'm going to share my screen. Everybody see it? Alma, can you see the screen? Okay, thanks.
Dry road, it was a clear evening, it was a perfect spring day and a perfect spring evening. For an accident that came in sounding very bad. It was a major intersection, which meant that there was possibly high speeds involved. The call came in was an accident involving children literally lying in the street. 2 minutes into our response, we got a radio call because we now have a motorcyclist involved. We had approached the intersection. As we got closer to it, we could see where there were cars that were actually stopped, waiting for us to go through, probably 3/4 of the way to the intersection. All of a sudden, from nowhere to the right, it was behind those two vehicles that she popped out. Absolutely no chance for us to see her at all. The car appeared in our path, and we collided. Basically, the reaction was I stiffened up at the wheel this way. Both Rick and I had seen her at the same time and hollered. I sensed the impact. I hear that noise, that crunch of the metal to this day, as vividly as the instant that it happened. Whether it was from the nightmares that I had after the accident or this is what I actually had seen before the impact, was her face looking up in total amazement that we were even there. That's still etched in my brain, but I honestly don't know if that's something that I actually witnessed or if it's something that came out into the nightmares afterwards. I don't remember anything after that. My next conscious thought was that we were on our side and spinning and the smell of smoke. I remember the ambulance flipping over on its side, and I remember looking through the windshield and seeing a landscape in front of us rotating as we spun down the road. First thing I thought of after that was, where was Rick? Because I thought for sure that when we had gone over on the side, that he might have been tossed out the window and was trapped between the squad and the pavement. I mean, a lot of hollering and screaming going on those first few seconds. So we both kind of figured out that we were both okay and trying to extricate ourselves out. At that time, there was a lot of bystanders that were starting to run up from every direction. And all I could do was look about and see equipment scattered about the inside the ambulance, around the outside where the back doors had sprung open. And then all of a sudden, one of the bystanders screamed and pointed, and about, oh, I'd say about 10 feet from the car was a body laying face down in the grass. It was the driver. I looked back to the intersection and I saw the car that we had hit. And at that time, I had seen Michael kneeling down next to a body. And that's when the second reality hit me. You know, we had indeed done some damage, and somebody was injured. The firefighter just happened to be over by the car and looked, and there's a little girl in this car. It was like the whole world stopped. There's a kid in the car. And Mike and I just kind of looked at each other and couldn't believe it. That was another reality that hit us, you know. Not only was there one victim, but there was two. Walter was breaking down in the back of the squad on the way to the hospital, saying that we got in this business to save lives, not take them.
All right, bear with me.
Ten minutes before the accident, I was living life and having a ball doing something I love to do. Had my entire career ahead of me,
I think
had no place to go but up.
we've seen that one. I want to go back and look at.
I was in the dispatch center. A call came in for an automobile accident with injuries. I dashed, literally dashed, outside of my office to go behind the wheel of an ambulance when I was the owner, operator, and principally a paramedic, an excellent paramedic and a caregiver. But I was going to dash to that emergency. I was going to save that life. Jerry Gordon, the most experienced seasoned medic there, was on the way. You didn't have anything to worry about. I did not think about putting on my seatbelt. I did not think about loss control. I did not think about emergency driving procedures, evasive procedures. I didn't think about defensive driving. I thought about going to this car accident. I was going to save a life. As I pull into an intersection, I see that the light is green. It's turning yellow. I'm not going to make it. I see cars pulling out of the intersection. Slammed on the brakes. I slid the car forward. I hit a Ford Torino at 30 some odd miles an hour, 20 some odd miles an hour, and pushed that Ford Torino across the intersection, over a curb and into a bank. The car came to a stop. My partner, who did not have his seatbelt on, had fractured his arm. I tried to step out of the passenger side of the vehicle. The door was damaged. I could not. I tried to radio for help. I couldn't. The vehicle was incapacitated. I stepped around my partner, went out the passenger side, went to the automobile, the vehicle that I'd struck. I saw what appeared to be a very attractive young woman, gasping for breath, blood on her face, her nose, a laceration on the side of her scalp, unconscious, unresponsive. I could not actually grasp the emergency supply bag. All I could say was, my God, oh my God, what have I done? Moments after that, fortunately, one of my other ambulances was behind me coming to the same scene because we had heard that there were multiple injuries. They stopped. They saw that I was injured. I was in an accident. I was taken away by them from the patient to say, Jerry, sit down. We'll take care of her. She was trapped in the car. A wrecker was driving by. They destroyed and removed the door of her car. The woman was extricated on the backboard. I do remember seeing her face and the panic when she looked, as you're looking at me now, through that windshield and hesitated and panicked and stopped right in the middle of the intersection. And she could not move. She froze. She couldn't believe it. And I knew that I was going to impact her. I knew that I was going to hit her. 5 days later, this innocent victim was pronounced dead.
Okay, so you can see how just getting involved in an accident, nobody gets up in the morning and wants to get involved in an accident, but you can see how fast these accidents happen. And if you listen to what these two gentlemen were speaking about, their accidents were below 35 miles an hour and still took the lives of a couple of people. Okay, what I want is I want to play the one last one where you could see both of these guys were taken to court. Both of them were issued summons. And now I want you to listen to their short video clip on what happened to them during the court phase. Okay, so let me see if it's the aftermath. Let me see if it's this one.
I was immediately taken off all duties at NASA, which hurt. And a lot of those guys, I don't think, knew what to say or do. So there was a lot of hands off there. It was kind of like I was out floating out, put out in a boat and just kind of like floating out in the middle of the ocean someplace and figuring, wonder where this thing's going to stop and where I get out. I've been doing this since 1972, and this was 1983. And I've always helped people. I've always saved lives. I've always been a caregiver. I've always been a good guy. No, I wasn't that anymore. I was a bad guy. I injured someone. I had my attorney telling me, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. No, they don't put paramedics in prison for trying to do their job. But I knew all along that that's what was going to happen. I was charged with running a red light, an involuntary vehicular homicide, and reckless driving. I received the citations from the police department, had a preliminary court date, went to court, came out of court. I saw the cameras. I was bound over to state court. Look what I did. Look what I did to this runner-up, this Miss Georgia beauty pageant runner-up. All of what they came out with was very negative. I mean, there was no focus whatsoever on what good I had done in the past 14 years. So what? That's not what we're here about. We're here because you screwed up. I was bound over to state court. I was tried. I saw on the stand all the people that were adverse to me, and convinced me of what I already knew, that I was a horrible person. I was sentenced and convicted to serve 15 months in the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta, Georgia, which I served my sentence. And I deserved it. And I had it coming to me. But that was a low point, being taken away from my family, put in handcuffs and taken away from my family. And you spend all your life and being brought up and nurtured in a way of how you treat people and caring about them and doing what you can for them. And putting it into practice and during your adult life in a career that's basically devoted to doing that. And all of a sudden you find yourself inside a jail instead of taking an inmate out. You're now wearing the orange scrubs and you're one of them. Stayed in my home and I never left it. Had food brought to me, I would not leave the house. Whenever the police department was in my complex to maybe serve someone with papers of divorce papers or to quiet down ruly neighbors, I knew they were coming to take me back to jail. A couple of very nice gentlemen in Cleveland gave me a job as a dispatcher, but it was very difficult to do because I still had the knowledge, I still had the expertise, and when these guys ran into trouble, I wanted to be able to key that mic and tell them what to do, and I knew I couldn't do it because I no longer carry a little blue card in my pocket. I didn't work. I knew that I had to. I remember going to work for a furniture store, working in the warehouse, lifting furniture for 10, 12 hours a day, knowing that this is all that I'm worthy of doing. This is all that I'd ever do. This was good enough. This is what I deserve. Instead of being Michael Montecalvo, firefighter paramedic, it was now Michael Montecalvo, convicted felon. Big difference. And I found out very quickly that regardless of the circumstances surrounding why you're now being called a convicted felon, it didn't matter. You're still a convicted felon. I was not Jerry Gordon anymore. I was nobody. I had no worth. I wasn't important. I wasn't significant. There were a lot of nightmares about the accident itself. And not so much looking at the victims, but when in these dreams, when I was there again, it was family members, my daughter, Freddie, other people.
Okay, so you can see why all of the EMS and law enforcement and fire take driver training so seriously. Okay, we're all human beings. We all make mistakes, but one little accident can affect people's lives forever. And this is why I wanted to share this with you. So, when you are in class and you think it might be boring and you're not paying attention, okay, you're setting yourself up for failure. All right. I mean, I've been doing this for 43 years, and I'll be the first to look you in the eye. I am not a know-it-all, and I practice my skills every day I'm on the job out there. Okay. I do not want to become a victim. I want to be able to help the people that are paying me to serve them. Any questions on now why safety should be our top priority and why we need to practice our driving skills and be well rested and everything else? There should be no doubt in our minds now why we are held to a higher standard when it comes to training and professionalism and operating a vehicle. Any questions about what we covered today? All right, then let's take roll call and let's make sure people get credit for being here. Hang on, let me pull up the Okay, Emily. Skylar. Marilyn.
Here.
America.
Here.
Perla.
Here.
Robert.
Here.
Jeremiah.
Here.
Oops, okay. Elaine. Elaine. Herman. Mackenzie.
Here.
Bianca. Bianca Lopez. Marissa. Marissa. Robert Romero. Anika and Alma. All right, anybody's name I did not call? All right, let's go back and take a look at the syllabus. Make sure that we're right on track. All right, we covered chapters 1, 2, and 3. Our next meeting is next Friday, March 5th, and we're going to cover chapters 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so next class meeting, be on the lookout, read your course announcements for the new meeting ID number and passcode. If you have any questions about the material you read in the book, some of you have contacted me numerous times during the week with questions, and that is great. So if you have any questions, I'm available to you around the clock. Okay, I try to get back to everybody right away. The quickest way is just text me and say, Jim, my name's Alma, I'm going to be calling you. And then I'll pick up the phone and talk to you and answer your questions. Are there any other questions for me? Rob, everything okay?
Yep. Good.
Good, good. Jeremiah, you on your game today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. You all have a great weekend. Thanks for participating, and we'll see you next Friday. Okay.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Have a good
Take
weekend.
care.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.